I asked Beyoncé's mother about the years before fame, and what she told me still shocks me. Most people think they know the story. They see the superstar, the icon, the woman who changed music forever. But they have no idea what happened in those hidden years before the world knew her name. The sacrifices, the secrets, the price that was paid in silence. I sat down with Tina Knowles expecting to hear inspiring stories about nurturing talent and believing in dreams. What I got instead was something far more devastating. A confession about a life that was given up piece by piece in the shadows of someone else's greatness. About a mother who erased herself so completely that by the time she realized what she'd done, there was nothing left to go back to. She told me things that night that she's never fully shared with anyone. Things that changed how I see sacrifice, motherhood, and the cost of creating a legend. And I'm still processing what she revealed. Because the most shocking part, it wasn't what I expected at all. But I had no idea what I was about to hear. Before there was a queen, there was just a girl. A girl with dreams that had nothing to do with raising a superstar. Tina Knowles was vibrant. She was ambitious. She had this fire in her that made people stop and look twice when she walked into a room. She wanted to design. She wanted to create. She had visions of her own future, one that belonged entirely to her, not as someone's mother, not as someone's support system, just her. But here's what she told me that night, and it still echoes in my head. I had plans. Real plans. I was gonna be somebody on my own terms. She grew up in a time when a black woman's options were limited. But Tina wasn't the kind of person to accept limitations quietly. She was strategic. She was talented. She was determined to carve out a space in the world that was uniquely hers. Fashion design called to her. Creativity ran through her veins like oxygen. She could envision things, clothes, styles, entire aesthetics that didn't even exist yet. And she had the skill to make them real. Tina painted me a picture of who she was supposed to be. A designer, an artist, a woman building something from nothing. She talked about the sketches she would create late into the night, the fabrics she would touch and imagine transforming into wearable art. She had mentors. She had connections. She was on a trajectory. The pieces were all in place. Her life was hers. And then she met Matthew Knowles. He was charming. He was ambitious. He had dreams of his own. And when they came together, something shifted. Not dramatically at first. Not in a way that screamed warning. It was subtle. The way most life-altering things are. She got married. She had children. These weren't bad things. They weren't mistakes. But they were choices that, once made, began to reshape everything she'd planned. Each choice led to another choice. Each compromise led to another. Compromise? And before she knew it, the girl with her own dreams was becoming someone else entirely. This is where her voice changed when she told me. It got quieter, more fragile. She described the moment she realized her sketchbook had been closed for months, then a year. She talked about how the creative fire that once burned so bright had been redirected, channeled entirely into supporting her family, into managing a household, into being the woman behind the man with the big dreams. I didn't even notice it happening, she said. That's the thing that still shocks me. I didn't wake up one day and decide to give up. I just woke up one day and realized I already had. She was busy. She was exhausted. She was pouring everything into her children, especially once she began to see something extraordinary in one of them. But before that moment came, there were already years of her own dreams being deferred, pushed to the side, made smaller and smaller until they barely fit into the margins of her life. The girl who had plans, the girl who was supposed to be somebody, that girl was disappearing. And it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. It was just the slow erosion of self that happens when you stop prioritizing your own voice and start living for everyone else's. Then she said something that broke me. I look back at photos from when I was young and I barely recognize myself. Not because I looked different physically, but because there was something in my eyes then. A light, a knowing. I was going somewhere. I had momentum. And somewhere along the way, I just stopped. And I never really started again. She didn't say this with anger. She said it with the kind of sadness that comes from a truth you've carried alone for decades. The kind of sadness that has become so familiar, it feels like home. Tina paused for a long moment, and I could see her doing the math in her head. All those years, all those roads not taken, all those sketches never drawn, all those designs that existed only in her imagination and nowhere else. The most shocking thing, she continued, and her voice cracked slightly, is that I don't even know if I'm angry about it anymore. I'm just sad, deeply, profoundly sad, because that girl, the one with the light in her eyes, she's gone, and I'm not sure she ever comes back. This is where I realized this wasn't going to be the uplifting story I'd expected. This wasn't going to be about a mother heroically sacrificing for her daughter's dream. It was going to be about something darker, something more honest, something that people don't usually talk about. It was about a woman who gave up the only life she was ever going to have. And the worst part? She hadn't even met her most challenging choice yet. But what happened next would force her to make a decision that would redefine everything she'd already lost and cost her infinitely more. There's a moment in every parent's life when they see something in their child that stops them cold. Not just talent, not just potential, something else entirely. A presence, a gift that feels almost otherworldly. For Tina, that moment came and it shattered everything. She was watching her daughter perform. It wasn't a professional setting. It wasn't some grand stage. It was just a school event. Something ordinary that thousands of parents attend every year. But when her daughter stepped out onto that stage, something shifted in the room. The air changed. People stopped talking. They stopped moving. Everyone was suddenly completely focused on this one child. And Tina felt it. She felt the electricity. She felt the magnetism. She felt something that she couldn't quite name. But she knew, with an absolute certainty that shook her to her core, that this was different. This wasn't just her daughter being cute or talented or special. In that way, all mothers think their children are special. This was something rare. This was the kind of gift that appears once in a generation. This was the kind of presence that, if nurtured properly, could change the world. And in that instant, Tina understood something else with equal clarity. Everything is about to change. Everything. She told me about this moment with an intensity in her eyes that I'd never seen before. It was like she was reliving it all over again, feeling the weight of that realization crushing down on her all at once. I knew immediately, she said. I didn't need anyone to tell me. I didn't need experts or teachers or anyone else to confirm it. I just knew. And the moment I knew, everything shifted. My entire life pivoted on that single moment because I understood that if I didn't do something, if I didn't step in and protect this gift and nurture it, it could be lost. It could be wasted. And I would spend the rest of my life knowing that I had the power to prevent that, and I didn't. This is where her voice got shaky. She was describing the weight of responsibility that descended on her shoulders in that moment. Not the warm, fuzzy feeling of a proud parent watching their child shine. No, this was something darker. This was the crushing weight of understanding that your child's future, possibly their entire destiny, now depends on the choices you make next. And she made a decision right there in that auditorium, watching her daughter on stage. I made a choice that day, Tina said. I chose her future over mine. Not consciously. Not in some grand, noble way. I just understood that everything I had been doing with my life up until that moment was insignificant compared to what needed to happen next. And I never looked back. But here's the thing that still shocks me about what she said next. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't inspiring. It was haunted. She understood in that moment what the entertainment industry could do to a talented young black girl. She'd heard the stories. She knew the predators. She knew the manipulation. She knew the ways that this business could chew up and spit out the most beautiful, talented, extraordinary people and leave nothing but empty shells behind. And she understood that if she didn't become the fiercest, most protective force in her daughter's life, that's exactly what would happen. I had to protect her, Tina said. Not just from the industry, from people, from experiences that were too much, too soon. From being exploited before she even understood what exploitation looked like. But mostly, I had to protect her from herself. Because talent like that makes you a target, and I couldn't let her be a target. So she made the choice, not one choice, a cascade of choices, all of them leading in one direction. All of them requiring her to become something she'd never planned to be. A guardian, a strategist, a shield. Which meant sacrificing the girl with the dreams. Which meant putting away the sketchbook for good. Which meant accepting that the life she'd imagined for herself was no longer an option. But I didn't hesitate, she told me. That's what people don't understand. You might think that I agonized over it, that I wrestled with the decision, that I grieved what I was giving up. But I didn't. Because the moment I saw that gift in my child, my own life stopped mattering. It just stopped. And nothing I could have done with my life would have ever compared to what I could make possible for her. She paused, and I could see the weight of those words settling on her. And that's the shocking part, she continued quietly. It wasn't a sacrifice in the way people use that word. It wasn't noble, it wasn't brave, it was just necessary. It was the only choice I could live with. Because if I had walked away, if I had said no, if I had decided that my dreams mattered more, I would have spent the rest of my life haunted by the knowledge that I'd let that gift die, that I'd allowed the world to lose something extraordinary. She looked directly at me when she said this, and there was something in her eyes that made my chest tighten. But what I didn't know then was how much that choice would cost me. Not just in terms of my career or my dreams or the life I could have had. I didn't know the psychological cost. I didn't know what it would do to me to pour everything into someone else's future and have nothing left for my own. I didn't know that I would wake up 20 years later and barely recognize myself. I didn't know that sacrifice, when it's this complete, this total, it changes you in ways you can't undo. She took a breath, and her voice became even quieter. I thought I was making a choice, but really I was signing away the rest of my life. And I did it without hesitation. And I did it without fully understanding the price I would pay. This is when it hit me. This wasn't a story about a mother who sacrificed for her daughter's success. This was a story about a woman who disappeared, who erased herself so completely in service of someone else's dream that by the time she realized what she'd done, there was no going back. And the most shocking part, she still didn't regret it. But that regret, that haunting, unspoken regret, it was coming. And it would be far more devastating than anything she'd experienced so far. But she didn't know that yet. In that moment, sitting in that auditorium, watching her daughter shine, Tina Knowles made a choice that would define the rest of her life. And the cost of that choice was only just beginning. Once you decide to nurture a gift like that, there's no stopping. The machinery of ambition starts moving, and it moves fast. Tina threw herself into it completely, not halfway, not with reservation, completely. She became obsessed, and I mean that in the most literal sense. Every waking moment was dedicated to one thing: creating the conditions for her daughter to succeed. She started researching. She talked to people in the industry. She learned about dance coaches, voice lessons, performance opportunities. She connected with other parents who had talented children. She began to build a network, a strategy, a plan. And then she started executing that plan with the kind of precision and intensity that bordered on ruthless. I became a machine, she told me. Not a mother anymore, not a woman with her own life. A machine designed for one purpose: to create a star. And here's what shocked me about how she said it. She said it like she was confessing to something, like becoming that machine had cost her something essential. The expenses started multiplying. Dance lessons weren't cheap. Neither were vocal coaches. Neither were the costumes, the transportation, the opportunities that required travel and time and money. Tina had to work. She had to earn. She had to sacrifice not just her dreams, but her time, her energy, her presence in her own life. I was working constantly, she said, not just at my job, at managing her career, at networking, at creating opportunities, at protecting her from the wrong people and pushing her toward the right ones. I was exhausted all the time, bone tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix, because I was running on something else. I was running on the belief that this was gonna be worth it, that all of this would eventually lead somewhere extraordinary. But it wasn't just the external machinery. It was the internal machinery too. She had to become a certain kind of mother, not warm and nurturing in the traditional sense. She had to be strategic. She had to be protective, but not overbearing. She had to push without breaking. She had to believe without wavering. She had to be the voice inside her daughter's head saying, "You can, you will, you must." And she had to suppress every doubt, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. "I couldn't let her see me struggling," Tina said quietly. "I couldn't let her see me grieving what I'd given up. I couldn't let her see me exhausted or scared or wondering if any of this was actually going to work. Because if she sensed any of that uncertainty from me, it would undermine everything. She needed to believe that I knew exactly where this was going, that I had the plan, that I could protect her and guide her and make this happen. So she became someone else, someone harder, someone more focused, someone willing to make difficult decisions that a softer version of herself would never have made. And here's where it gets dark, because Tina had to make choices about her daughter's childhood that went against every instinct she had as a nurturing mother. She had to say no to normal teenage experiences. She had to restrict friendships that she thought might be distracting. She had to push for more training when her daughter wanted to rest. She had to keep her isolated in certain ways, protected in a bubble, focused entirely on the goal. I had to be the villain sometimes, she said, the overprotective mother, the one who said no, the one who wouldn't let her just be a normal kid. And every time I did that, it hurt. It genuinely hurt, because I could see the resentment building. I could see her wondering why her mother was so strict, so controlling, so obsessed. But Tina never wavered, because she understood something that her daughter couldn't understand at that age. That the world was waiting to devour someone with that much talent. That predators and manipulators and people with bad intentions would smell that gift like sharks smell blood in water. That the only way to protect her was to be relentless, to be controlling, to be the kind of mother that seemed excessive from the outside, but was actually the only thing standing between her daughter and disaster. I became paranoid, she admitted. Not in a clinical sense, but paranoid about who was around her, what they wanted from her, whether they had her best interests at heart. And I made it my mission to vet everyone, to know everything, to control as much as I could control. And the machinery kept moving, year after year. More lessons, more performances, more opportunities, more training, more sacrifice. Tina was aging in dog years. She was getting tired. She was getting older, and the life she deferred was becoming increasingly impossible. By the time she might have had the space to reclaim her own dreams, she was already in her 50s. The window had closed. The opportunity had passed. The girl with the ambition was no longer a girl at all. But there was something driving her forward that was stronger than exhaustion, stronger than doubt, stronger than the knowledge that she was never going to have her own life back. It was the belief that she was creating something that would matter, something that would be remembered, something that would outlive her. I understood that I was never going to design the clothes I wanted to design, she said. I was never going to have my own gallery or my own brand or any of the things I dreamed about as a young woman, but I could create something else. I could create an artist. I could create a legacy. I could create something in my daughter that would change the world. And that became my masterpiece. That became the thing I poured all of my creativity into. And there's something almost beautiful about that realization, except for one thing. She wasn't creating. She was controlling. There's a difference. And the machinery of ambition doesn't just create. It consumes. It takes everything. And by the time you realize what it's cost you, it's too late. Tina was becoming increasingly aware of that cost. The exhaustion was turning into something darker. The sacrifice was starting to feel less like a choice and more like a prison. And then something happened that would force her to confront everything she'd been avoiding. Success came. It wasn't sudden, but it was undeniable. All those years of work, all those sacrifices, all that machinery grinding forward, it actually worked. Her daughter was becoming something extraordinary, The talent that Tina had recognized in that auditorium was developing into something that caught the attention of people who mattered. Record labels started calling. Opportunities started appearing. The trajectory that Tina had sacrificed everything for was actually materializing, and Tina should have felt vindicated. She should have felt proud. She should have felt like all of it had been worth it. Instead, she felt hollow. I remember the moment it really started happening, she told me. And I remember feeling this strange emptiness. Not joy, not relief, not even satisfaction. Just emptiness. Because I had spent so many years working toward this moment that I'd never actually thought about what came after. What happens to you when you finally achieve the thing you sacrificed everything for? The answer, it turned out, was that you realize you have nothing left. Tina was in her late 40s by then. Her daughter was becoming a star. The machinery had worked perfectly. And Tina was standing in the wreckage of her own life, looking around at what remained. There was no sketchbook. There was no portfolio. There was no body of work that was hers. There were no friendships that had survived the years of isolation and dedication. There was no romantic relationship that had weathered the storm of her obsession. There was no financial security beyond what she'd earned through her work supporting her daughter's career. There was no identity that was separate from being someone's mother, someone's manager, someone's guardian. She was a shadow, a supporting character in someone else's story. And now that the story was becoming successful, now that her daughter was beginning to stand on her own, Tina had to confront the fact that she had no story of her own. I looked in the mirror one day, she said, and her voice was so quiet I had to lean forward to hear her. And I didn't recognize myself, not because of how I looked physically, but because I didn't know who I was anymore. I had spent so much time being for her that I had completely forgotten how to be for myself. And here's where the real shock comes in. Because success didn't free her. It trapped her further. Once her daughter became famous, once the world started paying attention, Tina's role intensified rather than diminished. She became a manager. She became a strategist. She became the person who understood her daughter's career better than anyone else. She became indispensable. And you can't walk away from indispensable. I thought that once she made it, I could finally step back, Tina said. I thought that once she was successful, I could reclaim some part of my own life. Maybe start designing again, maybe finally pursue the things I'd put on hold. But what happened was the opposite. The more successful she became, the more I was needed. The more I became essential to her success. And walking away from that, even for a few hours a week to do something for myself, felt like a betrayal. The machinery had evolved. It was no longer just about creating a star. Now it was about managing a star, protecting a star, guiding a star through the treacherous landscape of fame and fortune and the constant threat of exploitation and corruption. And Tina was the only one who could do it. She was the only one who cared enough, the only one who understood the stakes, the only one willing to make the hard choices. So she didn't step back. She couldn't step back. Years passed. Her daughter's career soared. Records were broken. Awards were won. The world fell in love with the artist that Tina had created. And with each milestone, with each achievement, Tina felt something inside her dying a little bit more. I was getting older, she said, and I was watching my life path, and I was acutely aware that there were things I wanted to do, things I wanted to experience, things I wanted to create that had nothing to do with her career. But there was no time. There was never time. And even when there was time, I couldn't imagine doing anything for myself, because that felt selfish. That felt wrong. That felt like I was abandoning her. The machinery had done its job so well that Tina couldn't imagine stopping it, even though it was destroying her. And then something shifted, something subtle but profound. Tina's daughter was no longer a child who needed constant protection and guidance. She was an adult, a successful adult, an adult who had her own team, her own advisors, her own life that was increasingly separate from her mother's. And Tina was suddenly faced with a question she hadn't allowed herself to ask in decades. Who am I without this? Who am I if I'm not her manager, her protector, her guide? The answer terrified her. I realized that I had completely erased myself in service of her, she said. Not just my dreams, my entire identity, my sense of self, everything. And now that she didn't need me in quite the same way, I was facing the void. I was facing the fact that there was no one waiting for me on the other side of this. No dream that I'd kept alive, no life that I'd protected, no version of myself that I could return to. She had sacrificed her youth for her daughter's future, and now her daughter had a future, but Tina had no present. She had no sense of who she was apart from being someone's mother. She had no plans. She had no goals that were hers alone. She had nothing but the machinery that had ground her down into nothing. The most shocking thing about success, Tina told me, and there were tears in her eyes now, is that it doesn't heal anything. It doesn't make the sacrifice feel worth it. It doesn't bring back the years you lost. It doesn't restore the person you gave up. It just confirms that you made a choice, and you have to live with that choice for the rest of your life. She paused, and I could see her struggling with something, some realization that was still too raw to fully articulate. I created a legend, she said finally, but I destroyed myself in the process. And I'm not sure that was a fair trade, but the machinery doesn't stop just because you realize the cost. It keeps grinding. And Tina was about to discover that the price she thought she'd paid was nothing compared to what was still coming. There's a moment in every person's life when the weight becomes too much to carry, when the facade cracks, when you can't pretend anymore that everything is fine, that the sacrifice was worth it, that you're okay. For Tina, that moment came in the middle of an ordinary day. She was in a meeting about her daughter's career, contract negotiations, tour schedules, marketing strategies, the kind of meeting that had become the fabric of her existence. And she was sitting at a table with lawyers and agents and business managers, and someone asked her opinion about something, and she opened her mouth to answer, and nothing came out. Not because she didn't have an opinion, but because she suddenly, acutely realized that she had no idea what she actually thought anymore. She had spent so many years thinking about what was best for her daughter, what was best for the career, what was best for the brand, that she had completely lost the ability to think about what was best for herself. She didn't know what she wanted. She didn't know what she believed. She didn't know who she was outside of the machinery that had consumed her. And it broke something in her. I just sat there, she told me, staring at these people who were looking at me, waiting for my input. And I realized that I had nothing to give them. I had given everything away, and there was nothing left. She left that meeting and drove home in silence. And when she got home, she locked herself in her room and she cried. Not the kind of crying that releases pressure. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep inside you that you didn't even know it existed. She cried for the girl with the dreams. The girl who wanted to design. The girl who had plans that were all her own. The girl who had existed before the machinery took over. She cried for all the years she'd lost, all the experiences she'd missed, all the versions of herself that she'd killed to create space for someone else's future. And she cried for the realization that it was too late to get any of it back. I was 53 years old, she said, and I had the body of someone who was 70. I had the emotional reserves of someone who had given everything. I had no savings because I'd invested everything into her career. I had no relationships because I'd sacrificed every friendship and romantic connection to focus on her. I had no identity because I'd completely subsumed myself into her existence. And then came the thought that truly broke her. What if I die tomorrow? What will I have created that was mine? The answer was nothing. Absolutely nothing. All the creativity that had burned in her as a young woman, all of that had been poured into creating her daughter's career. And now, looking back at her life, Tina realized that she had created something extraordinary, something that would be remembered, something that would matter to the world. But she had created it as a shadow, as a background figure, as someone whose contribution would never be fully acknowledged or celebrated or recognized as her own. I understood something in that moment, she said quietly, that I had made a choice that was, in retrospect, a form of suicide. Not literal suicide, but the death of self. I had voluntarily erased myself in hopes of creating something greater. And I did create something greater. But I was not part of it. I was not included in the triumph. I was just the person who made it possible. The breaking point wasn't a single moment. It was a series of moments that all came together at once. It was the morning she woke up and realized her body hurt in ways that seemed permanent. It was the day she looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. It was the time she went to a family event and realized she had nothing to say about her own life because she had no life of her own. It was the moment she understood that her daughter, now successful and independent, no longer needed her in the same way, and that without that role, she had no purpose. It was the accumulation of decades of small deaths, small sacrifices, small erasures, all of them adding up to one massive realization. I have wasted my life. And the cruelest part? Her daughter didn't understand what it had cost. How could she? From her perspective, her mother had always been there. Her mother had always been strong. Her mother had always known what to do. Her mother had never shown weakness or doubt or the kind of despair that was now consuming her from the inside out. She didn't know that I was dying, Tina said. She didn't know that every day I was waking up and fighting the urge to just give up, to stop, to finally do something for myself. But I couldn't. Because even now, even after all these years, even though she didn't need me anymore, I couldn't walk away. Because walking away would mean admitting that I had wasted my life, and I wasn't ready to admit that. So she kept going. She kept showing up. She kept being the strong mother, the reliable manager, the person who had all the answers. But inside, she was crumbling. The breaking point came to a head when her daughter asked her for advice about something personal, something that required her to dig deep and give emotional guidance. And Tina opened her mouth to speak, and instead of wisdom, what came out was rage. Not directed at her daughter, but rage nonetheless. Rage at the machinery. Rage at the sacrifice. Rage at the fact that she was supposed to be the healer, the guide, the one with all the answers when she herself was barely holding together. "I remember my daughter's face," Tina said, and her voice cracked. The shock, the hurt, the confusion about where this anger was coming from. And I realized in that moment that I had damaged something. Not her, but the relationship. Because I had given so much, sacrificed so much, that when I finally couldn't give anymore, when I finally expressed anger or frustration or any of the very human emotions I'd been suppressing for decades, it shattered her understanding of who I was. The breaking point taught her something crucial. That sacrifice, when it's this complete, this total, this absolute, it poisons everything. It poisons the relationship between mother and daughter. It poisons your sense of self. It poisons your ability to be present in your own life. And the most shocking realization of all was this: her success doesn't redeem my sacrifice. Her achievement doesn't make my erasure acceptable. Her triumph doesn't justify my loss. She had spent decades believing that if her daughter became successful enough, if she achieved enough, if she reached a level of fame and fortune that was truly exceptional, then it would all be worth it. The sacrifice would be redeemed. The loss would be justified. But standing at the breaking point, Tina understood the terrible truth. Nothing could ever be worth this. No amount of success could justify the death of self. No amount of achievement could bring back the years she'd lost. No amount of triumph could restore the person she used to be. And she was going to have to live with that knowledge for the rest of her life. When Tina finally agreed to sit down and talk to me about all of this, I expected her to have reached some kind of resolution, some kind of peace, some kind of narrative arc that would allow her to look back and say, yes, it was hard, but it was worth it. That's not what happened. What happened instead was something far more honest, far more devastating, and far more shocking than anything I could have anticipated. She told me that sitting across from her daughter now, watching her live her life, watching her enjoy the fruits of all that sacrifice and suffering, Tina doesn't feel pride. She doesn't feel vindication. She doesn't feel like a job well done. She feels regret. The most shocking thing, she said to me, and I could see the pain etched into every line of her face, is that I would do it all again. And I hate myself for that. I hate that I would make the same choice. I hate that even knowing what I know now, even understanding the cost, even feeling the emptiness and the rage and the loss, I would still choose her future over mine. She paused, and her hands were shaking slightly, because that's what really shocks me. It's not that I sacrificed. It's not even that I sacrificed too much. It's that the machinery got so deep inside me, that the machinery became so much a part of who I am that I can't imagine being any other way. I can't imagine being a woman who chose herself. And I don't know if that's nobility or pathology, but I know it's destroyed me. The real shock, the thing that had been building through all of our conversations, came when she told me about a moment that happened just a few months before we met. She was alone in her house. Her daughter was away on tour, and And for the first time in decades, Tina had complete, uninterrupted time to herself. No meetings, no schedules, no obligations. Just her and an empty calendar and the vast, terrifying expanse of free time. She decided to paint, not design clothes. She didn't have the energy or the hope for that anymore. Just paint. She set up a small space in her home, and she bought some supplies, and she sat down to create something, anything that came from inside her and belonged only to her. And she couldn't do it. I sat there for hours, she said, staring at the blank canvas, and I couldn't make a single mark because I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what I wanted to create. I didn't know what I believed or felt or wanted to express. The machinery had taken over so completely that the artist part of me had died, and I couldn't bring her back. She put down the paintbrush and she cried. Not the cathartic crying of before, but the crying of someone who has finally accepted a truth they can't change. She had sacrificed not just her dreams, but her ability to dream. She had sacrificed not just her time, but her sense of self. She had sacrificed not just her career, but her ability to imagine a career. The machinery had ground her down so completely that even when she finally had the space and freedom to reclaim her own life, she didn't know how. And the most shocking part of all, she told me that her daughter, the one she had sacrificed everything for, doesn't fully understand what it cost. How could she? From her perspective, her mother made a choice to support her, to guide her, to believe in her, a choice that any loving mother might make. She doesn't understand that it wasn't really a choice. Not in the way we think of choices. It was a compulsion. It was the machinery taking over and eliminating any other option. She feels guilty sometimes, Tina said. I can see it. She feels guilty about what I gave up. And she tries to compensate by being grateful, by acknowledging my role, by publicly thanking me. But that just makes it worse, because the gratitude means nothing. The acknowledgement means nothing. It doesn't give me back the years. It doesn't restore the self that I killed. It doesn't make the machinery stop grinding. Tina told me something else that truly shocked me. She said that if she could go back, if she could somehow rewind time and stand in that auditorium again, watching her daughter on stage, knowing what she knows now, she still wouldn't change anything. And that's the most horrifying part, she said, because it means that I'm not really a victim of the machinery. I'm a willing participant. I chose this. I choose it every single day. And I don't know if that makes me noble or just broken. She told me about the dreams that still haunt her. Dreams where she's young again, back in art school, surrounded by her own work, creating things that belong to her. Dreams where she made different choices. Dreams where she had the courage to say no, to choose herself, to believe that her own life mattered as much as her daughter's future. And she wakes up from these dreams and remembers that she's 58 years old now, that decades have passed, that the window for those other lives, those other selves, has permanently closed. I think about the woman I could have been, she said quietly, all the time. I think about her constantly, and I mourn her. I genuinely mourn the person I never got to become. But here's what truly shocked me the most. After all of this, after the sacrifice, the loss, the breaking point, the devastating realization of what it all cost, Tina told me that she still loves her daughter completely. That love hasn't diminished. That love hasn't turned bitter or resentful. And she still believes, despite everything, that her daughter was worth it. That's what really shocks me, she said. That I can see clearly now what it cost. I can articulate the price. I can feel the loss. I can acknowledge the destruction of self. And I still think it was worth it. My daughter is extraordinary. She's changed the world. She's created art that will outlive us all. And I made that possible. I sacrificed myself so that she could become that. And even though it destroyed me, I still think maybe that was enough. Maybe that was noble. Maybe that was the right choice. But then she paused, and her voice got very small. Or maybe I'm just broken. Maybe I've been broken by the machinery for so long that I can't imagine any other way to be. Maybe I'm confusing sacrifice with love. Maybe I'm calling destruction nobility because the alternative is admitting that I wasted my life. I don't know anymore. And that uncertainty, that's what still shocks me the most. The conversation ended there. We sat in silence for a long time. And I realized that there wasn't going to be a satisfying resolution to this story. There wasn't going to be a moment where Tina looks back and says, yes, it was all worth it, and I'm at peace. The peace never comes. The justification never arrives. The machinery keeps grinding even now, even after all these years. And Tina carries inside her the weight of a choice that she would make again, even though she knows it will destroy her. That's what truly shocks me about what she told me. It's not that she sacrificed. It's that the sacrifice became her identity. It's that she can no longer separate herself from the machinery. It's that even with full knowledge of the cost, even with the ability to step back and choose differently, she still chooses the same thing. And I don't know if that's love or pathology. I don't know if that's nobility or self-destruction. All I know is that Tina Knowles gave up everything to create a legend. And now she's haunted by the question that will never fully be answered. Was I creating a masterpiece, or was I destroying myself? And the most devastating part of all, she'll never really know.